Right, so we're going holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 18. Again, we're going holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 18. We're in verse 4. Again, we're going. The Torah says, "Es mishpatai ta'asu es ukursai tishmeru laleches bahem ani Hashem Elokech." So here the Torah says that you shall do my judgments, keep my ordinances, right? Things that don't make sense. Logically, I am the eternal your God, right? So he said before that even things, Rashi said, even things that make sense, Torah's going to tell me anyway, right? You shouldn't think, oh, it's such a wonder, why does the Torah tell me? Because Torah tells you anyway, things that make sense, even things that don't make sense, right? And keep my ordinances, Rashi said, without the inclination, right? It's going to say, why are you observing them? What's the point? Right? You're going against the nations of the world. They're going to say things, right? They're going to say things also, why can't we pig? Why can't we wear clothes, a mixture of wool and linen, or the red heifer, right? And you're going to walk in them, right? Walk in them means, Rashi says that you're not going to say, well, I got enough wisdom, from the Torah. Let me learn, other wisdom. Let me learn, let's say secular wisdom. So that was what Rashi brought down. And we were in the middle of this Ramban. And Nachmanides, we said before, he brings down Rashi, right? And then he brings up the idea of V'chai B'hem. What does it mean, V'chai B'hem? That you're going to listen to what the Torah says, right? You're going to listen to live by the Torah, right? You should live by the Torah, not die by the Torah. Now, what does that mean? Right? What does that mean in the vernacular? It means as the Gemara says, you should die by it. Right? In other words, Koch Nefesh, saving a life, supersedes the laws of Shabbos. Right? In other words, dangerous situation, do whatever you can to try and minimize Shabbos desecration as best you can, but at the same time, the Torah says you should live by it, right? Not die by it. So if you have to desecrate Shabbos, so you do it. If you can minimize desecration, always better. Certainly always better. But, if you have no choice, you have no choice, right? That's it. Save a life. When we say Pekuach Nefesh is Doichas Shabbos, right? It pushes away the laws of Shabbos. So I have an obligation to save a life, right? Or whatever the dangerous situation is. I have an obligation to try and help the person as much as possible. And even if that's a great job, so we're sort of in the middle here. That the Ramban over here says further. The Ramban says that you should know that in the life of a person, what are we doing? What do we do in this world? We're in this world to toil, right? We're in this world to do what God wants us to do, right? It's going to be a struggle because, again, we have struggle between good inclination and the bad inclination. But we're in this world, the Mission Perkel says, and I think our fathers will get there when about 110, I don't know, or 95, I should live that long. And that is that this world is prosdor, the portico. And I love that word, portico. It's a portico. It's a portico to the next world, which means I got to prepare. I got to prepare in this world. Preparing in this world means, as the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah 2b to 3a, we talked about God giving the Torah to the other nations, and the other nations reject it. The Jewish people accept the Torah. Nonetheless, the Gemara there says also The Gemara says if you don't prepare Erev Shabbos, you don't eat on Shabbos. Now, what does that mean? Simply, it means that obviously if you don't prepare food on Friday, you won't eat on Shabbos, right? But it means if you don't prepare in this world, then what's going to be in the next world? You got to prepare, right? It needs preparation. So here the Ramban says that in the life of a person, we're obligated to do mitzvahs, right? Jews are obligated to do mitzvahs, non-Jews, whatever applies to them, very good. You do the mitzvahs according to how you prepare. Yeah? What does that mean, how you prepare? Right? Essentially saying, why am I doing the mitzvah? What is the purpose? We understand the purpose is what? Draw close to God. Very good. That is the purpose. Yeah. But in preparation, he says if a person that does a mitzvah not for the sake of receiving reward, right? What we call shalol lishmano manas l'kabel pras, right? Not to receive a reward. So he says, you live with them, you live with it in this world, right? Many days, with wealth, property, and honor. Yeah, that's the highest level. In other words, we understand there's reward for mitzvahs that we do, right? There's reward for mitzvahs that we do, very good. Now, since there's reward for mitzvahs that we do, now everybody knows that we're going to get reward in the next world. But a person, if they're going to keep the mitzvahs because they're not going to get reward, yeah, meaning they're keeping the mitzvahs because they're keeping the mitzvahs. God told them to keep the mitzvahs, whether we're going to get reward or not, right? So that's a very high level, right? It's extremely high level because the person is not doing the mitzvahs, A, because they're going to fry it out forever if they don't do it, right? Or B, to get a portion of the world to come. Yeah, even though we know that we'll get reward in the world to come, very good. But here he's telling you, in preparation, we should really serve God, not to get reward, right? That's the highest level, right? Not to get reward. So says the Ramban, you know what that means? You know what that means if you serve God in such a way? He says you're going to have long life, right? Long days, meaning long life in this world and probably in the next world. But he's talking about this world, though. So in this world, and what are you going to have from it? What are you going to have from this world? You have wealth, you have property, and you have honor. Right? So where's the test? Where's the test over here? We're in this world, the Ramchal says, path of just, he says in Derech Hashem, right? In the way of God as well. You're in this world to toil, right? Sometimes easier, sometimes it's harder, right? We speak about this a lot. You know, people have all kinds of tests. Very good. Yeah. So if a person, they're keeping Torah for the reason, obviously because God said to do it, but they're keeping Torah regardless of whether they're getting reward or not. In other words, they're serving God on conditions they don't get reward. In other words, they're going to say, we're going to serve God, doesn't matter if we get reward or not. We're going to serve Him because it's the right thing to do. Right? We said before that the Chos of Ovos Duris the Heart, he says, why does God give reward anyway? Right? The Bishop Perkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, tells us that a person's going to think, they're going to get all these rewards, and they're going to feel good about themselves for keeping the mitzvahs, right? What does the Mishnah say? But that's what you created to do. So how can a person, be haughty? How can they be conceited? Say, oh, look at what I do. Look at the mitzvahs I do, this, that, right? That's what you created to do. Sometimes you do better, sometimes not, but you're going to walk you're walking on air, you're walking on water because, look, I keep the mitzvahs, right? I should get, a lot of reward. Why did you get reward? Why in the world should you get reward? Right? That's what you're commanded to do. It comes on the Chos of Ovos, right? The Chos of Ovos says, why do you get reward? Not because you deserve it. You are commanded, a Jew is commanded, right? Non-Jew also, whatever applies to them, but you're commanded to keep the Torah mitzvahs. You are commanded to do whatever the Torah says. You are commanded to listen to what the rabbis tell you. Very good. That's what I'm supposed to do. You want reward also? Don't be a pig. Good. Right? Why should you get reward? You are commanded. You want that hoodsie? Right? You want the hoodsie? Forget about the hoodsie. God doesn't have to give you anything. He gives you life. He supports you. He takes care of your needs. Right? So why the Choshen says you get reward? Why do you get reward? One reason. He says chesed. It's an act of loving kindness. That's the only reason. He doesn't need to give you a reward. Right? He gives you life. He gives you everything. Takes care of your needs. Right? You don't need reward. We shouldn't even demand reward. Even though we understand there's going to be a reward. Okay. But why does he give it? He doesn't have to. You can just say, you're commanded to do what I say. Shut up and eat the manna. Right? Shut up and pray. This is what you have to do. This is what your obligation is. Yeah, I should give a reward for something I commanded you to do. I am the living God. Right? I create the world. I create the universe. I make sure, the earth doesn't get too close to the sun. Otherwise, it would be incinerated. I make sure Earth doesn't go too far back. Otherwise, we'd be a frozen tundra like Pluto, right? Even though Pluto got demoted as a planet. Right? No offense to Pluto. Right? So God says I do all these things. I take care of nature. I take care of black holes. I take care of, animals, plants, all these different things. You want reward? You really want reward? Why should I give you reward? That's both of us. You know why? You know why he gives reward? Because he's a Baal Chesed. He wants to do acts of loving kindness. He doesn't have to. Right? The Mishnah Perkei Avos says that's what you're commanded to do. You are commanded to keep whatever he says. Very good. So if I'm commanded to keep whatever he says, where's reward come in? I shouldn't need reward. Right? But he does as a chesed. Right? It's a little bit of incentive also. Maybe keep us on the straight and narrow path a little bit. Yeah? Because we know we're going to get reward. Okay. But a higher level, much higher level, serve God, you're not going to get reward. Right? Whether we get reward or not, it doesn't matter. Yeah? That we should serve God that way. Someone told me, I mentioned the story before, someone said, when I die, I'm going 6 feet up, 6 feet under. So I said, for your sake, you're right, because if I'm right, then you're in trouble. They pay back in the next world. It's like, what's the next world? It's like, can you explain me life after death in the soundbite? I said, yeah, I'll send you a link. I don't know the person, saw the video, didn't see the video, whatever. But the person asked, okay, let's say I'm right. Let's say I'm right. That when you die, you go 6 feet under, nothing happens. Poof! Right? You die like a dog. No, no offense to any dog lovers out there. A person dies like a dog. Nothing happens. No dog, you have it. Yeah, nothing happens. Very good. Then what would you say? I said, first of all, I don't think you're right. But even if you would be right, even if there would be no portion of the world to come, yeah, even if there'd be no portion of the world to come, there's no better way to live a person's life than according to the Torah. Even if there's no reward. Now, some people keeps them in line. If they don't do what they're supposed to do, there's guilt. There's guilt. They don't want to get cut off. They want something for what they're doing. Makes sense, right? It's incentive. But again, he doesn't have to do that. God certainly doesn't have to do that. All he has to do is say, listen, I give you the ability to live. I give you the ability to serve me. That's enough. That should be enough for you. Right? Okay, so we understand the portion of the world to come. Very good. If we do enough, what we're supposed to do. Someone asked me last night in Perkei Avos that the Ramchal there in Way of God, right, in Derech Hashem says that there's a minimal level. There is a minimal level that a person needs to reach to have a portion of the world to come. Right? So they asked me the $1 million question, what's that minimal level? And the Ramchal does not answer. Nobody knows. But you have to reach a base level in order to have a portion of the world to come. So I remember talking to some 18, 19-year-old yeshiva guys, right, many years ago, and I'm talking about reaching potential, and someone pipes up and says, well, if I keep kosher and I keep Shabbos, am I good? Someone says, well, what if I go by this rabbinic supervision for kashrus. No, he's dead. Like he's gone. What's the minimal level? Nobody knows. Can't rest on your laurels. Nobody knows. Yeah, we just have to keep plowing ahead. But what does he say over here? He says an amazing thing over here. He says if a person is going to prepare in this world, which we have to, and they're going to keep Torah mitzvahs. Why? They're going to keep Torah mitzvahs for one very simple reason. They're going to keep it not to receive reward, right? To much higher level. They're keeping Torah mitzvahs not to receive reward. Okay. Very good. Yeah. What's the guarantee? What's the guarantee, says the Ramban? The Ramban says, if you keep Torah mitzvahs, in order that you're not going to get rewards, he says, meaning in the next world. So you get plenty of reward in this world, right? You have long life, right? Your life filled of wealth, property, and honor. All right, want to sign up, right? And anyone want to sign up? Does it always go this way? Doesn't always go this way. The Gemara says, the Gemara Baruch says, a person doesn't, not everybody inherits both worlds. Meaning that they'll have wealth in this world, and there'll be, like a big rabbinic scholar would have a great portion of the world to come. Doesn't go both ways, right? If a person has money or has a lot of money, then money absorbs them. Totally absorbs them, right? How am I going to make more money? Add another business, do this, whatever. It never gets out of their system. Never gets out of their system. You can never have too much honor. You can never have too much wealth. Person always wants more. Very good. Yeah, but you don't get both. You don't normally get both worlds. Okay, he's talking about this one. Right? The Ramban here is telling you, if you serve God not to receive rewards, and you're really serving him honestly, then you're going to get reward in this world. Right? Forget about the next one. You'll get in this world. You have wealth, fame, right? You have property. You have honor. Now, the question is that the Gemara says, the reward of a mitzvah in this world is not. You don't get reward in this world. There is no reward in this world for doing mitzvahs. Now, it could be, if I do the mitzvah with great joy, I get reward. I get some of the reward, not all the reward. I get some of the reward. Okay. Right? That would be one thing. But he's telling you, if you serve God in this way, you get reward in this world. Yeah? You get reward in this world. Tremendous reward. Now, I can ask a very, very simple question. Does it always work out this way? If someone's really on the level, if they're really on the level, and they're serving God for the sole purpose to serve him, and for no other reason, if they're serving him for that reason, does that mean other things can't go wrong and he doesn't get this blessing? He's telling you if you're serving him for that reason, that's the reward. I would say not so simple. Why? Maybe someone's going to sin and do something. They won't get the reward. We see this week's Parshas Vayetze. Yaakov Avinu tells God, take care of my needs. Feed me, take care of my needs. God says, no problem. And then he asks him a second time. Yaakov asks God a second time, same thing. Yeah, take care of my needs. Feed me. So the commentaries ask, and they're bothered by, why does he ask twice? Right? Why does God ask twice over here? I'm sorry, why does Yaakov ask twice? If God already told him, I'm going to give you your needs, I'm going to feed you, you got nothing to worry about. What's he worried about? Why does he ask him again? If God told you something, he told you. You don't have anything to worry about. God says guarantee. Right? Not a problem. Guarantee. He can write it in stone. Not a problem. So why does he ask him a second time? So the commentaries say that what's Yaakov afraid of? He's afraid, what if he does something to sin? What if he causes a sin that now he doesn't get this divine providence? Right? Now he doesn't get this divine help. Right? Let's say. Right? Let's say that is the case. Let's say that's the case. So what happened to the promise? Right? So the promise goes out the window. Why does the promise go out the window? Because now he broke something, he did something wrong. And because he did something wrong, God's going to take this away. Right? He's going to take away divine protection. But Torah says, very clear, right? God says, I'll take care of your needs. Okay. But what's he worried about? He's worried about what if he doesn't deserve God to take care of his needs? What if he messes up? What if he sins? Yeah. So here, very good. If a person's serving God not to receive rewards, so God will give it to him in this world, right? To get wealth, fame, give him property, give him honor. What if he slips up? What if he messes up in other ways? Does that divine promise stick or not? Does it stick or not? That's the question. That is going to be the $1 million question here. But he's telling you straight out, this is what should happen. Right? This is exactly what should happen. That if you serve God, not to receive reward, again, you're not bragging about it, whatever. That's what you do. You're serving with deep humility, regardless of whether you're going to get reward or not. Doesn't matter. You're serving him, let's say, better. Not to receive reward. What is God going to do? He's going to give you wealth. He's going to give you property. He's going to give you honor. Yeah, very good. Says the Ramban further. And he says, if a person, now let's say the opposite. If a person is keeping Torah mitzvahs in order to get a portion of the world to come. Because that's what most people would say. They would say, or they would say about us, you're serving God and doing the mitzvahs for what reason? For what reason? Because you're going to get a portion of the world to come. Right? There's reward to come. And it's also not so easy because, we go through a lot of difficulty, a lot of hardship. Okay. Yeah, but it's going to keep people in line, some people. It's going to keep them in line, right? Keep Torah mitzvahs. They don't want to mess up because they want to have a portion of the world to come. Very good. So he says, okay, those people are going to serve God in order to get reward in the next world. How do they serve God? They serve God out of fear, right? What's the fear? The fear is, if I do something wrong, I'm in trouble. That's the fear. If I do something wrong, I'm going to fry in hell forever. That's a low level of fear, right? It's fear of God because I don't want to mess up. I don't want to lose my portion of the world to come. What's the higher level? It's what we call yiras hisromamus. What does yiras hisromamus mean? It means fear based on God's awesomeness. Now, what is God's awesomeness? The way he runs the world, i.e., God through nature, looking at the universe, looking at the human body, right? Seeing miracle after miracle through nature, the human body, and other things to realize we're an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. And the fact that God runs the world allows us to be here, even though we are the greatest of creation, right? Man was created on the sixth day. If we do what we're supposed to do, then we're the pinnacle of creation. We're the greatest of creation. If we don't do what we're supposed to do, then the animals are even better than us. Why are the animals better than us? Because they were created before. So, we have to do what we need to do, but there's a very high level here, right? So the highest level of fear is understanding not only that God's in charge, not only that he runs the world, but you understand, look what he does in the world. Look at the miracles of nature. Look at the miracles of space. Look at the miracles of the human body, right? That's, you're looking at God in an awesome way, and that's a much higher level than saying, well, I'm going to fear God because I'm afraid I'm going to fry in hell forever. But he says, but nonetheless, he says, if a person's serving God, in order they're going to have a portion of the world to come, very good. Why are they serving him? They're serving him out of fear. Yeah, they're serving him out of fear. So if a person is serving God out of fear, Says the Ramban, what will they merit? What will they merit? They will merit with their intention to be saved from judgment of evil people. Yeah, so it's an amazing thing. In other words, even if you're serving God out of fear, and you're serving God for the sole reason because you want a portion of the world to come, yeah, that's why you're serving God. What does it save you from? It saves you from bad judgments. It saves you from evil people having sway over you. That's what it does. Now, again, someone's going to ask, and there's an obvious question, and that is, let's say you're doing that to the best of your ability. That's how you're serving God. Okay. Does that mean there are no trials and tribulations? Does that mean this applies? You can say, well, I have this problem. Or other people have had this problem. Right, let's say. They got taken advantage of. Yeah. They ran into problems. So how's that answer? Right? How are we going to answer that? You say, well, it's part of life. Well, it shouldn't be. In this case, it shouldn't be. So what's the simple answer? The simple answer is we're not serving God the way we need to. And if we serve, again, in the ideal sense, if we would serve God the way we need to, properly, controlling our thoughts, controlling what we see, being humble, all these different things, yeah, all these different things, very good. So that should work. That 100% should work. That we should be safe from these things. But if we're lacking, if we do things wrong, yeah, we don't properly repent or whatever, it's payback. Right? There will be payback, whether in this world, next world, both worlds. Right? Doesn't really matter. But according to this, if you serve God the right way, even you're serving him out of fear. So because you're serving him out of fear, yeah, you're on a certain level, right? You're on a certain level. Doesn't mean you don't make mistakes, right? But you're on a certain level over here. What would a person merit if that was the case? If that was the case, you're safe from these things. You're safe from this negativity, right? So again, it's very hard to balance here. And the reason is a person can be serving God for the right reason. They could be doing mitzvahs for the right reason. That does not negate the fact of trials and tribulations. Now, there are certain things we may go through, as we've mentioned before. A person may go through certain things, not because you sin. Maybe it has nothing to do with your sin. Maybe it has to do with the fact that your soul came back to this world. Most people, if not everybody, is a reincarnated soul. So your soul has to go through this world for whatever reason, for payback for what it did in the previous life. And you get payback for that. So maybe that's not a question over here, because if you're doing the right thing anyway, and really you should be saved from all kinds of different things. Well, let's say you're not. So it could be you're still doing the right thing, right? We're not denying that, but it could be your soul has to go through other things. And since your soul has to go through other things, this doesn't apply. So there are things, even though what he's saying is true, right? I'm not saying it's not true over here, right? There could be other overriding factors, yeah, where this doesn't apply. Right? That's the only point. That's the only point I'm making here. And then he says, so he says, okay, that's if you're serving God out of fear. Now, there's a problem here. There's another problem here. The other problem is serving God out of fear is good. Right? What does King Solomon say? I think he says in Proverbs is that fear is the beginning of all wisdom. Yeah, you need fear. You absolutely need fear to serve God. Okay. Now, the problem is the person has too much fear. What's going to happen? You'll be afraid to do anything. You'll never get out of bed. Right? Too much fear is bad. But you need fear. Fear is the base. Now, does fear necessarily lead to love of God? No. Fear, a person will do things because they're afraid they don't want to get punished. So that's very hard to pass down to your kids. Just like sharpen the monster, because if not, you're going to fry it out forever. They're like, okay, so I'm going to fry it out forever anyway. So what? So I won't eat the monster, so I'm going to fry anyway. Yeah? If it's only out of fear, then that's not so easy to pass down. Love of God can lead to fear of God, right? If a person loves God and wants to serve him because of all the good things he does for us, then that will lead to fear of God. Fear of God does not necessarily lead to love of God. Now, we mentioned before also this idea of love, right? We just mentioned for a second, I was speaking about the last number of weeks in my podcast, that love of God, what's the word love? The word love is aleph hey beis, ahav, right? Or ahava, right? Known as love. What's the root of the word? Aleph hey beis, or the root of the word is hey beis. What does the word hey beis mean? Hav, right? In Aramaic, it can mean to bark, like a dog barks, right? Or a box, if you were from Boston. Yeah. So what does the dog say? Hav, hav, right? It barks. Dog barks. Okay. But what does hav also mean? Hav also means to give, right? So says Rav Yaakov Yisrael Fisher of blessed memory. Yeah, he was one of the Torah giants of the last generation, according to everybody. And he once told me this idea, right? In other words, you want to get the love of God? How do you get the love of God? You have to give. You have to give of yourself. You have to work. You have to toil. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Because what's the obvious question? We say God is good. We believe God is good, yeah. So what about evil? Right? And what about terrible things that happen? Terrible things happen to people. People suffer. Yeah, so Book of Chaim, of blessed memory, says that nothing bad comes out of heaven. Now, what does that mean, nothing bad comes out of heaven? That means in our puny brains, we don't see. We're not able to see. So really, it's only good that comes out of heaven, not bad. So what about the bad in the world? What about suffering? Man's inhumanity to man and all kinds of things. Good. So Chofetz Chaim says we're too small to understand. We can't understand why these things happen. People have the inclination. God created evil, right? Regardless of what the Christians say, right? Isaiah chapter 45, verse 7, mentioned this last week. Yeah, that God says what? I created evil. Right? A lot of very interesting translations there, but that's what it means. God created evil. For a Christian, that's a problem. Why? Because where does evil come from? From the Satan, right? Mr. S, evil inclination, whatever you want to call it, right? Right? He's the one that creates evil. But that's the problem. They also have the same problem. If God is good, what do you do with evil? What do you do with suffering? Good. Right? It's a good question. Right? By us, it's an age-old question. We don't understand. You can tell me, okay, person will suffer for their sins. They do something wrong. There's payback. Okay, a person can repent, very good. There might be payback in this world, might be payback in the next world, might be payback in both. But a person got to take responsibility. I say all the time that if Christianity would be true, which obviously we believe it isn't, but if it would be true, I'd be the first person to sign up. And I sign up thousands. I'd convince thousands to be a Christian. Why? It's the easiest thing. All I have to do is believe in JC, say a couple Hail Marys, I'm good. Right? There's no responsibility for your actions. None. Go to confession every once in a while. Pay off some of the priest a little bit. Very good. Right? The only problem is it's not true. It goes against the whole base of what the Torah is. Because the Torah tells you what? There's responsibility for your actions. Right? You see at the very beginning, Adam and Eve ate from the tree. They brought that to the world. That's not a Jewish concept. Never was a Jewish concept. Okay, but God had to go to plan B. Right? God had no choice. He had to throw them out of the Garden of Eden. Because God forbid they should eat from the tree of life. They eat from the tree of life, fame, they're going to live forever. It's a problem. They can't get atonement if they don't die. Right? They have to go in the ground. It's not, that's not a full atonement. It certainly helps, for some transgressions. It's not going to help for all transgressions. Right? Especially if there's no repentance. But anyway, that's not the point. You see their repercussions. Right? Cain has a discussion with Abel. He kills his brother. God chastises him, wants him to repent. There are repercussions. All throughout the Torah, there are repercussions. Right? And, the Christians a lot of times come up with Webster's fourth, fifth, eighth definition of why that doesn't apply and why he came to say, for all our sins and all that. Goes against the foundation of what Torah is. All about responsibility. Yeah, we say in the second paragraph of the Shema. First paragraph is all about what? It's all about taking the yoke of heaven. The second paragraph is taking upon the yoke of mitzvahs. Sorry, the first paragraph is taking on the yoke of mitzvahs. What's the second paragraph all about? Reward and punishment. It's very clear. You do what you're supposed to do. There'll be rain, there'll be food, there won't be any problems. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, there's payback. There'll be famines, there'll be all kinds of catastrophes. Yeah, it's very clear. Very, very clear. So we can say, okay, if things are not going our way, most likely we've done something wrong. Now, I mentioned this before, many times before, I get this question a lot. People say, but what I'm going through right now, I want to know the measure for measure, right? We believe God meets our punishment measure for measure. So people say, I want to know the measure for measure. I think it's a chutzpah question. I understand why. I definitely understand why people would want to know. But why do I say it's chutzpah? Because Moshe Rabbeinu himself asked God the same question, right? He said, let me understand your ways. Let me see how you run the world. What does God tell him? Book of Exodus, very clear. God says, no one can see my face and live. You can only see me from behind. No one can see my face and live. What does that mean? That means you'll never understand in 10 lifetimes why things happen and how they happen. Moshe Rabbeinu came to the 48th level of the understanding. There was one level of understanding it didn't have. Yeah? There's one level of understanding it didn't have. Now, because of that, God says you'll never understand. Right? I'll give one example. I mentioned this before. Give an example. Moshe Rabbeinu, the Medrash says, he sees in Egypt, he sees a baby being used as mortar. Going to be made into a brick and packed into a wall. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I want to save this child. Anybody would want to save the child if they could. Makes perfect sense. God says, no, bad idea. Don't do it. Yeah? But he's overcome by emotion. He saves the child. He saves the child. Okay? Who's that child grow up to be? That child grows up to be evil King Achab. That's who the child becomes. Later becomes. Now, anybody in that situation would have done exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu did. Even if God said don't do it. Right? It's something that touches our soul. Something that looks absolutely cruel. How can someone stand by if they had an opportunity to stop it? Good. That means what we see, we don't understand. Right? We don't have a clue. Right? We have no clue what we see. I'm also convinced, not everyone necessarily agree, right? But I'm also convinced, in that case, if God would open our eyes and God would say, okay, I'm going to show you, right? He gives you prophecy for a little bit. And God opens your eyes and he shows you exactly why you're going through certain things and exactly what you've done to have to go through that. Now, I'm not convinced. Other people can disagree, right? You can take this with a grain of salt, right? I'm not convinced if God would show us 100% why we're going through this, that, and the other thing, that a person would be saying, okay, I'm happy. At least I know, right? Other people say no. They would want to know. But, I would think, if God shows you, listen, 3 years ago, you did this, that, and the other thing. I was waiting for you to repent. You did it. I tried to give you this and that and the other. And, whatever, so now I'm paying you back now. So now you're going to say, wait a minute, for that? Now, you might look at it. Let's say it's an innocent thing. Let's say it's an innocent thing. You're going to punish me for that? You're going to hold all this against me for that? And that I didn't wake up and I didn't do this? And that's how it works? I think a person will go out of their minds. And again, people can disagree. People can definitely disagree. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced they would be ecstatic to hear that. Yeah. So, I understand why people want to know. And I understand why it's a burning issue. Right. But again, I would say if Moshe Rabbeinu asked the question and he got rejected, yeah. So how are we to ask the question? Thousands of years later, God says, no one will ever know. You'll never understand. There's no point to even try and figure out. You'll never get it. So you gotta say, how can I repent? What do I repent for? Well, you repent for anything you've done, right? Person does something wrong, next day they should repent for it, or that second they should repent for it. Sometimes we forget what we've done, other things, okay, right? But at the end of the day, a whole year is very good. Before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we're going to ways to go, but God doesn't forget. He doesn't forget what we've done. If we take an opal before we go to sleep, before your head hits the pillow, you take a cheshbon nefesh, you take a self-accounting, what you did during the day, where your thoughts were, how you interacted with others, how you prayed, how you kept mitzvahs, what did you do? What did you do that day? Some days I think will be better than others. I think some days we'll get maybe C minus or maybe even an F, depending how we feel, what we're going through, different things. But if a person does that on a daily basis, what's going to happen? You're going to know where exactly they stand. Now, again, how much of it gets weighted and how God looks at it, okay. Yeah, as like you say, we don't know exactly how God's going to look at it. Some things he'll weight more. Some things maybe he'll give you a little bit of a pass on. Whatever, it depends. It obviously depends what it is, right? But at the end of the day, then you know the score. And if a person is honest, I mean, I'm not saying we have to throw ourselves under the bus. You throw yourself under the bus, then there's no hope for any of us. Like my Rebbe would say, if you live in the past, you have no future, right? Which is true, right? Because you get caught up in what you're going through. You get caught up what you're going through right now. Even so, what do I have? What do I have? You can't just whitewash it. You can't just say, well, I live in the past, I have no future. You move on, right? You got to think about what you've done, right? You absolutely have to think about what you've done. So that's one thing. Then he says, so that's about serving God out of fear. So then he says the Ramban over here, if you did the mitzvahs out of love, you did it because you love God, you want to do what God says. Yeah, not out of fear. If you do the mitzvahs out of love, the way you're really supposed to do them, forget about Kabbalistic intention. You do it the way you're supposed to do it. Very good. Yeah. If you do it the way you're supposed to, then things in this world, he says, are going to be easier. Going to be a lot easier. You have to worry about livelihoods. You have to worry about family. You have to worry about health. Right? You merit in this world. Right? You merit in this world good life right the way in the world. Again, it's also kind of understand, because person has difficulty, right? But he's telling you, in this case, no difficulty. No difficulty. If you're doing it 100% out of love, yeah, so you merit many things in this world. Many good things in this world. And then what's going to happen? You get both. If you're serving God out of great love, you are going to get plenty of good things in this world, and you have great merit in the next one. His language is, the reward you'll get is complete in the next one. Meaning you have a portion of the world to come. You have a nice portion of the world to come. If a person, now he goes to a whole nother level here. He says, if a person serves God and he forsakes this entire world, right? In other words, he doesn't need so much, doesn't get benefit from this world, right, at all. He's living at a very high aesthetic level. As if to say, I mean, that's how far the Ramban goes, as if to say he's not human. He's like not in a human body. He's more like an angel, right? He's more like an angel in all his thoughts and all his intention. What are all of his thoughts and intention? They're all about the Bari, all about the creator of the world. That's their focus. It's their only focus. They sit and learn. They say Tehillim. They don't eat very much. They're separate from this world. Okay, they have to come to synagogue to pray. And do other mitzvahs. Very good. But their main concentration, what they're focusing on, is separating from this world, only focusing on the Creator. Now, if a person would do that, which is very few people today, if any, right? If a person had that intention, it would be like Eliyahu Navi, right? It basically went to heaven alive, right? Totally separates from this world. And he's so attached to God, he's so attached to God's name, right? So to speak, he's going to live forever, right? In that body, in that soul. Just like Eliyahu, just like Elijah the prophet. As it's mentioned in Kabbalah. Very good. Yeah. Like Hanoch, right? You have certain people that reached a very, very high spiritual level, and God took them alive. They didn't die. Eliyahu never died. Went to heaven, right? In this fiery chariot. Hanoch, God took him before. Say he took him alive. Right? Also. So if a person loves God so much, and they're attached to his name, they're attached to the Creator, that is their main focus. 100%, that's their main focus. Yeah, in theory, they're not really living in this world, right? They should be able to live forever, right? Like Elijah the prophet, let's say, because their whole intention is they're separating from this world. They're only attached to God. They're only doing God's will. Now, again, that's not going to apply to most people. Totally not going to apply to most people. So he says there are different levels here. A person can serve God totally out of fear, right? 100% out of fear. And they'll get certain things. They'll get certain things in this world. They can serve God out of love. By serving God out of love, what does that do? What is that going to do? That's going to give them many things. It's going to give them many things in this world. And what's it going to do? They can purify themselves to such a point where they're so attached to God, that they can end up like Elijah the prophet, right? God takes them alive. Like they're so attached to God, so separate from this world, they're not even considered almost human. I mean, they're human, they're in a body, right? They are in a body, but he says, the Ramban says, as if they're not human. Meaning, they're only spiritual, right? They're only spiritual. Their goal is be totally attached to God. Nothing else matters. That's what they do. And they're striving to reach very, very high spiritual levels. Very, very high spiritual level. And then the Ramban ends, just finish this Ramban, take some questions. He says, therefore, when it talks about reward of the mitzvahs, what does it say in Exodus chapter 20, verse 12? Right? Naman ya'arichun yamechu. For the sake of what? You should have long life. Right? Long life. What does long life mean? He says, and Torah says, Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 20, right? For the sake that you should be resurrected, you should live, literally, but I think it's not a resurrection there. And long life means in the next world. You should have long life in the next one. Because that's what is included over here. And he says at the end, this is fitting for every person. That's the kicker. Why do I say it's the kicker? Because people will say, come on, who's he talking to? This love of God he's talking about a very high level. Very, very high level. Yeah, or not such a high level, doesn't matter. Right? Doesn't matter. But everyone has this ability. Everyone has this ability. So it depends how we do mitzvahs. Depends how we live in this world. He's not telling you, well, this is only for X people. or Y people. Yeah, he's telling you if you love God at that level, it's such a high spiritual level. You might have stats like Elijah the prophet or Hanoch. Okay, so that's not going to be most people. Probably not going to be most people. But get in a portion of the world to come. Get in reward because of either their fear of God or love of God, right? And get in reward in this world. That is reachable by every person. Some people get more of it. Some people get less of it. But the Ramban is making very clear. He's not telling you, this is always, for the righteous. Right? A number of times the Chos of Avos, Duties of Heart, he says, he's talking about certain levels of whatever it is. And he says, you may think I'm only speaking to the righteous, and this is only for the righteous to reach. Not true. This is for everybody. Yeah, but you're gonna say there are obstacles, there's hardship, there are a lot of tests in the process. Very good. There's a lot of things that can prevent the person from doing this, but he's telling you if you do it right, you do it in the right way. Right? No, no bragging. You have true humility. You're going in the right path and all that. This is what you should get. This is what you should get in this world and the next world. That's what you should get. He's not telling you, you're doing everything according to Kabbalistic intention. Yeah, he's not telling you, he's not telling you it's going to be easy either, but he's telling you, if you do this, right, if you serve, the first level is, you serve God in order that you're not going to get reward. Very good. You're not going to get reward. What do you get? Wealth, property, honor. If you're doing it for the right reason, right, there's true humility. There is, there's no haughtiness. There's no thinking you're God's gift to the world. Then that is what should happen. Love of God can reach you other levels. Yeah. Fear can reach you certain levels. Very good. But it's possible. This is what he's telling you. It's possible. Now, the Ramban's writing almost 1,000 years ago. A person will say, come on, in our cream puff generation, does this apply? Why shouldn't it apply? I mean, we may not reach the level of Elijah the prophet. Okay. Potentially. But everyone has that potential. Right? If you do it for the right reason, you have the right intention. Right? He says you keep the mitzvahs the way you're supposed to do it. And a person can reach certain levels. And that's by everybody. Yeah? You tell me about we have setbacks, we have difficulty, we have other things. Okay. That all may be true. But he's telling you here, everyone has that ability. Now, I think part of the problem is, we get beaten down in life. That's true. I think that's part of the problem. But I think the other part of the problem is we're lazy. Yeah? We're absolutely lazy. We don't want to work hard. We want everything to be given to us on a platter. We don't want to have any hardship. But people say, no, not true. I'll take hardship. I'll take difficulty. I'll take hard work. I'm not against hard work. But the problem is when it comes, people don't know what to do. People don't know how to deal with it. Like, why is it so hard? Why are these people doing this against me? Why, why this, why that? As if to say life's not fair. Well, life's not about what's fair or not fair. The question is how I deal with it, right? So a person saying, well, who's going to reach this level or I'll fall short? He's not saying that. He's saying if you do what you're supposed to do, right? If you do what you're supposed to do properly, what happens? This is what should happen. So a person may say, but you don't see too many people that have that. We're not talking about the level of Elijah the prophet, right? Where do you see people that have, tremendous wealth and tremendous property and tremendous honor, where they're serving God not to receive reward? They say, you don't know what's going on in the heart of a person. Okay. Yeah, that may be true. Yeah. How common is this? How common is it? Now, you can say maybe it's not so common, even if some people are doing that, because they're doing other things to offset it. See, this is the problem. This is exactly the problem, right? There could be a prophecy or, statements made and say, this should happen if you do this, that, and the other thing, right? And we'll say it doesn't happen. The person says, well, it must not work. I'll tell you a few stories. One, I mentioned Diane Fisher before. I had a student that went to see him because his wife was expecting, the baby was breech. So he has a certain thing to do. There's a certain a certain spring where you take water and the wife gives it to the husband gives it to the wife, and it's supposed to turn the baby. Yeah, it's a specific thing. So he told the student of mine, go to this well, go to this spring, right? Take the water, do this thing, and it should work. And the baby should turn. So he did it, and it didn't work. He went back to Rav Fisher, and he said, it didn't work. They said it's impossible. There had to be something you did wrong. He told him again, go to this place, take the water, do this, do that, and it should change. It should change. He said, it has to be, you didn't do it right. So he went back, did the same thing, still didn't work. I was getting a little bit nervous, like, what's going on? So we went back a third time. Rav Fisher, as he walks in the door, he starts screaming. I said, I told you didn't do it right. Don't tell me it didn't work. You didn't do it right. He told him again. You know what to do. Anyway, he did it a third time. I know exactly what changed. But after that was done, the woman felt the baby change. And a few weeks later, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. So this guy goes back to Rav Fisher, and he says, I want to say, Muslim, my wife had a baby boy. The baby wasn't breech. What the Rav said worked. He said, of course it worked. Not because I said it, right? Because it's brought down as a very special omen, right? For these type of things. So it had to be, if the rabbis tell you, like, this is a good thing for this, sometimes, there are certain potions to take for certain things where they say if it doesn't work today because they don't have the same properties today, or they weaken today, or, whatever. But if something's done in a way, the rabbis say this works, and it still works, let's say. So Rav Fisher told him, it's impossible that it doesn't work. The rabbis tell you it works, you must have done something wrong. That's why I screamed at you. Because you had to have done something wrong. But he didn't know what he did right. That's the funny part of the story. He did the same thing a third time. He didn't, something changed. I don't know exactly what, but whatever it was, it worked. Yeah. So Rav Fisher told him that the rabbis tell you that it works, and it has to be that you did something to cause it not to work. So I'll tell you another story. There's also a good omen. If a person, says certain things for a period of time, let's say 40 days. 40 days. So one omen is, you say Tehillim 40 days. You complete a book of Tehillim, the book of Psalms. Yeah? So the easiest book of Psalms, the least amount of Psalms to say, is from Psalm 90 to 106. 16. There are 16 kapitel Tehillim. 16 chapters from Psalm 90 to 106. Now, what do? Before you say them every day, even on Shabbos. Now, before you say them, you promise you're going to give charity. You're going to give, some money to charity. It doesn't have to be a lot. And when you get the salvation, whatever it is, you say nishmas. You say the prayer of nishmas, and you tell people about it. You tell people about it. Now, after you say the Tehillim, after you say the 16 chapters, you have intention for one thing. Only one thing. Could be health, could be livelihoods, it could be any number of things, right? But it can only be one thing. It can only be one thing. Now, there's another thing that people say. They say Perek Shira. Perek Shira is supposed to be good for livelihoods and find a spouse. Now, I had someone told me they were saying Perek Shira for 40 days. They were saying it for 40 days. Their livelihood situation got worse. And at that time, it's still true, but at that time, they hadn't met their spouse. They hadn't met a prospective spouse. So they said, what am I supposed to do? This is supposed to be a good thing for, finding a spouse and livelihood. And I didn't find a spouse, and it got worse. Now, again, it has to be 40 days straight. You can't miss a day. Right? You can't miss a day. You didn't miss any days. Okay. So my advice was, say it again. If it doesn't work, say it again. This is not magic. It's not abracadabra. Yeah? Even if you say these Psalms, again, Psalms 90 to 106, you say it every day. You have intention for one thing. It's also not magic. Why do I say it's not magic? Well, isn't this good for whatever you need? True. But God can say, I'm still not giving it to you. Just because the person said a magical formula, right? In general, that's going to open up doors. It can help. I'm not saying it's going to hurt. It can, saying Tehillim always helps, right? Saying Psalms always helps, But let's say a person did it for 40 days. Nothing happened. So you can say, it doesn't work. Yeah? What would Fisher have said? Keep doing it. Right? If it's meant to work, it should work. People think, I mouth the words, I say it, that should be good enough. But the problem is in all these things, right? Let's make very clear. Even if this is good for this, and this is good for that, and this is good for something else, that all may be true, except that there's something blocking that you're not going to get that blessing. And why are you not going to get that blessing? Because God doesn't want you to have it. Why doesn't He want you to have it? I don't know. If I knew that, I'd be world famous. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Right? Be a prophet. Right? I'm not a prophet, not a son of a prophet. But there must be some block somewhere. Yeah, there must be something else going on. Right? And that X factor we cannot forget is God. Because no matter what we do, let's say as the Chofetz Chaim says, he says in Shar B'tachon, gain of faith and belief in God. We have an obligation 100% to put our best foot forward, no matter what we do. Whether it's health, whether it's livelihood, right? Livelihood's a good example. I put my best foot forward, do whatever I can. Is that a guarantee for success? Now, some people, if they don't believe in God, will say yes, because that's what you have to do. So it's the work of your hands, right? But you make a mistake. There's a big X factor here. Big X factor is God Himself. But I have an obligation. 100%, we have an obligation to put your best foot forward. By putting your best foot forward, by putting your best foot forward, that 100% is not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee. You have to do it, right? And the heavenly influence will come, but not from where you expected it, right? Most likely, right? But you have to do it anyway. Now, the problem is, person say, I put in the time, I put in the effort, I put in my best foot forward, and I'm getting slammed all over the place. Okay, not going to be forever. There will be a light at the end of the tunnel. Salvation can come in the blink of an eyelash, right? As we always say. And when the salvation comes, it's from somewhere you probably never expected. Usually that is the case. But you have an absolute obligation in this world to put your best foot forward. There are people, I know a few, that basically, they're relying on God for most things. So they get all their needs taken care of in miraculous ways. Not exactly the way they probably thought, but this person told me a number of years ago, their child getting married the next night, and they were still short about $60,000. They're not people with means by any stretch. Right now, I'm not worried. God will take care of it. I didn't hear the story. I didn't hear the story of what happened, but they're on a level. How's God going to take care of it? No idea. No idea. There's so many stories. The apartment they live in now, how they expanded it, different things. There are many, many stories. How things happen to them that are above nature. There's no possible rationale why it happened except that God did it. And it doesn't make any sense. Many things. Many, many things. Right? Okay, they do minimal hishtadlus. Minimal of putting your best foot forward. Okay. But they're on a level for that. Not everyone's on a level to do that. They would say, well, my son needs to get to yeshiva. I don't have money. I don't know how, he's going to do that. But it happens. Might not always look pretty, but they manage. So putting your best foot forward is an obligation, right? Let's keep that in mind, right? That is an absolute obligation. But people forget one important factor. And the important factor is if God doesn't bless it, all the putting your best foot forward is not going to do anything. But you have to do it anyway, right? That is your obligation. God can say no. God can say maybe. God can say, okay, I'm going to open doors now. Why now and not before or this, that? I don't know. Maybe, God has to see, the depth of the heart, so to speak, as we'd say in Boston. Meaning that, my Rebbe would say, when a person prays, mentioned this before, why does a person not get their prayers accepted? Moshe Rabbeinu, Parshas Veschanon, says over 500 prayers. Beseeching, begging. God, that's what the word Veschanon means, to beg. Really to beseech. Yeah? God told him he's not going into the land. What does he do? He has, more than 500 times, he has different prayers that go up that tries to convince God to let him in. Finally, what does God tell him? God tells him no more prayers. Stop praying for this. Because God eventually was going to relent. But he stopped. He stopped him. He didn't allow him to go in the land. Very good. Didn't allow it going in the land. Now, that being said, my Rebbe says, okay, so why do our prayers not necessarily get answered? Why don't they get answered? He said, because you got to feel like you're on your knees. You got to feel like there's no one else to turn to. Literally, you got to beg. You got to beg. And when a person's in dire straits, it's very easy to do that because you have nowhere to turn. You don't know which way to go. Yeah? According to nature, you're stuck. And you may be stuck, and maybe stuck for a while. Maybe look really bad. Okay. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that's what he's saying. It's not enough just to pray. Right? There are people that, they go through all the motions, they say the words, but they're not praying. Their mind's elsewhere. Right? Prayer over here means you got to beg. You got to be like you're on your knees, even if things are good. Because you don't know, as King Solomon says, we mentioned before, as King Solomon says, you don't know what today's going to bring, you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, right? You have no idea, right? You have to beseech. I don't think people say beseeched anymore. You got to beg, right? That's what it means. You got to beg. And if you don't beg, maybe God will answer you, maybe not. But he said, that's a clear indication. It's a clear indication, maybe why your prayers are not being answered. So I heard someone recently say, it was before Rosh Hashanah. So you say slichos, say these penitential prayers before Rosh Hashanah. Sephardim, if you're Sephardim, you say it all month. Right? Good luck to the Sephardim. You say it for all month, for an entire month. before you pray in the morning. Ashkenazim do it about a week before, sometimes 10 days before, sometimes a week before, right? It's only, it's only 7 days or whatever. It could be even less than that, right? Depending. So what's the difference? I heard someone say, what's the difference between the prayer books, these slichos, previous generations and ours? What's the difference? So I'll tell you what the difference is. Said the slichos of my grandparents or my great-grandparents were drenched in tears, right? Tears all over the book. And the book is totally worn out. By us, the book, okay, it might be a little bit worn out. There are no tears. That's the difference. Major difference. Because you say, if a person today on Tisha B'Av, on the fast of the 9th of Av, right, the most depressing day of the year, and you read some of these penitential prayers, these horrific things, about women eating their children, the 10 martyrs, viciously murdered, right, and killed. It's horrific. Maybe we read some of these things, maybe a tear drops. Maybe a tear drops. Because we don't know how to feel. Our hearts are hard as a rock. Yeah. You say, I'm not in the mood. Yeah, you're sitting on the floor in the dark, at night or during the day. Not pitch black, obviously, but whatever. You're sitting on the floor. This is what you should be thinking about. Thinking about we still don't have a temple today. There's still unlawful hatred between people. People still speaking Lashon Hara. But look at the destruction over the years. Throughout the millennium, horrific things. Why it's good to read Holocaust books during that time. Yeah, it's probably the only time of the year it's a good time to read it. Yeah, it puts you in a certain frame of mind. The closest thing we have to utter destruction, of our people. Because in the previous generation, no one's around. No one's alive. But okay. Yeah, you read some of these books, absolutely horrific, these stories. Right? It pulls at us. It should pull us. Should make us think. Yeah. But not only that, you should have a tear or two drop at least. At least. But you say, come on, we don't really feel it. It's a very weak generation. This, that. Okay. Yeah, that may all be true. Right? There's only one problem. That's not an excuse. It doesn't give us an excuse over here. We go into Rosh Hashanah, you read these penitential prayers. It's all about life and death. You come in before God as an ani, as someone who's poor. Poor in not dollars wise. Poor in mitzvahs. Poor in observance. Poor in the way we think. And our heads are mush. We just say the words. Even the first night. Saturday night, say 11:30, 11:45, whatever it is, depending where you live. It's the first night. Everybody comes. Young women come. Young children come. Yeah. And you go home. But again, it's emotional the first night. A little bit emotional the first night. Second, then the person, let's say, says in the morning, earlier, next, for the next week, it's a little bit less. It's a little bit less. And you're just saying the words. Right? You're saying, but that's the nature. That's the nature of who we are today. Right? So you want to hold by the least common denominator? That's what we're striving for? Yeah. You gotta feel. More of my Hasidic side here coming up. You gotta feel with the heart. You gotta feel what you're missing. You gotta feel, you read these things about destruction. I think it was Rabbi Shmuel, one of the 10 martyrs, screamed out when they came to they were ripping off his face. Can you imagine having your face ripped off? I can't imagine. Yeah? Can't imagine the pain. They got to the makom tefillin, the place where he puts tefillin. Right? And he screamed out, the whole world shook. The whole world shook. They scraped his face off. Terrific. We read it. Other people give a kvetch. Some people are in tears. Some people, they feel bad. It's cruel. It's a horrible feeling. They can't bring themselves to cry. What does that mean? It means there's something wrong with us spiritually. That's what it means. How can a person not feel? How can they not feel? You read something like that, very graphic. Yeah, with the story of Rabbi Shubin Traju. Yeah, he got taken and wrapped the Sefer Torah around him. They burnt him alive. But they put some cotton around his heart so the flames wouldn't get to it so much. He suffered. Right? They made him suffer more. So the Gemara says, it was his execution. He says, listen, if you give me a portion of the world to come, I'll take it off, you die quicker. So he said, granted. So he did it, and he jumped in and he died also. Right? As a Basco, as Emily Boyce says, even this Kras Tenori, whatever he's called, this executioner also had a portion of the world to come. Very hard to understand the story, but that's not even the point. They made him suffer to the point they're burning him alive. They're burning him alive, but he's not dying. He's not dying. It's not going directly to his heart. Yeah, because they put, I don't know, wool, whatever it was. They put something by his heart, yeah, that the flames wouldn't catch it. So it would take longer to die. Unbelievable suffering. That's Edom, by the way. That's Rome. Yeah? Suffer like dogs for all the Torah they learned. And you read something like that, if a person's not emotionally affected, there's something wrong with them. Seriously wrong with them. Again, a person can say, okay, I feel bad, this, that. Think about it. Because of sin, this is what happened. This is what happens. Collective punishment. The Sari Haruge Malchus, the 10 martyrs, right? Why'd they die? Well, they died because of the sin of Joseph, what the brothers did. Yeah? Because a direct connection was not even the point. Yeah? You got to feel it. You got to feel it. We're in exile today. Nobody feels the exile. I feel it more now in the States and other places because of all, anti-Semitism. Okay. But it's very interesting. Nobody's coming to live in Israel. Everyone's buying guns. The little story, Mamdani, became the mayor, unfortunately, of New York. You got all these Jews now buying guns. Okay, they got to protect themselves. No one's coming here. no one's coming here. After October 7th, same thing happened. Okay, people have a good excuse why they can't come here. It's one thing. It's one thing. Right? But a lot of people in exile, they barely feel it. They live the life of kings. Life of Riley. Some better, some worse. Yeah, even today. They don't feel like they're missing anything. Missing the temple? What are they missing? They got everything where they are. Strong communities, they got kashrus, they got, yeshivas, they got girls' school. What are they missing? They got all the trappings. They got everything. I'm going to go, someone told me, Messiah comes, go to Israel. I'm not interested. It's in the winter, it's cold, you get wet. You never get dry. It's always cold. That's why you wear an extra sweater. It's a lot of going on and on with these different things. I said, if you would make it alive after the war of Gog and Magog, you're going to come to Israel. You're not going to complain about any of this. I said, you know why? Because there's going to be no evil inclination. The evil inclination is going to be destroyed, right? Mr. S is going to be destroyed. So I said, you're not even going to complain about anything because if you survive, you won't have an evil inclination. But that's the mentality for some people. Oh, I don't have to come there. It's too cold. Or I can't imagine, if you have an excuse, okay. But, people say things, they don't care. They're living the good life. Why would I come back? Why would I go? Because they don't know what they're missing, right? They're too much in the exile. Too much in they don't feel it, right? Even with the anti-Semitism today. Still, some people feel a little bit more, some people less, but it's not driving people out. Definitely not driving people out. Again, people have businesses, people have other things. Okay, not so easy. But how many people even have the desire? Because they're living the life of Riley. Why would I come here? It's compact. Big places here. You're not gonna have 3 floors. You're not gonna have a house, or maybe in some places you might. Whatever. What are you missing? You're missing. They don't feel like they're missing anything. That's what exile is. That's what Golos is. That's what it is. They don't feel it. Right? They don't feel anything. They go about their business. They eat, they drink, they this and that. Okay, keeping Torah mitzvahs is very good. Right? That's definitely good. Yeah, if they are. Look at everybody else. Look at the 13 million Jews don't even know Shema Yisrael. They don't know nothing about nothing. I'm not even talking about that. I will mention one thing. I saw a story the other day. It's absolutely repulsive that it needs to be said. There was, they have this group. There's the reform group called Women for the Wall. Yeah. And they want to have equality at the wall, have their own, prayers or everything. So whatever. They gave us, a small portion of the wall where they can have their egalitarian service, this and that. But there are always times you hear stories, and again, even before I mention what happened, that, if you would ask a Reformed Jew, what are the top 10 problems today facing world Jewry? One of them is not going to be the Western Wall. Yeah, because I guarantee 99% of Reformed Jews have no idea what goes on in the Western Wall. Yeah, has no idea what this movement even is all about. But why do I mention it? Why do I mention it? Because there are a number of times they don't allow them to have a Torah scroll. They will not allow them to read from a Torah scroll, right? They won't allow them to desecrate a Torah scroll. There have been times they've tried to bring it on their bodies, other things, try and get a Torah scroll in. Now, what are these unbelievable geniuses do? What are they trying to? They tried to smuggle it through a bathroom. I can't even make this stuff up. They tried to smuggle it through a bathroom. You can't bring a Torah scroll into a bathroom if it's kosher. It's not kosher. Shouldn't bring it in through a bathroom. Yeah? It's only certain things you're allowed to do in the bathroom, right? We'll keep this clean. You can read National Geographic, you can read all kinds of things. You can't read Torah. You don't have to think of Torah in the bathroom. How in the world these people so misguided? How in the world did we want to bring a Sefer Torah, we want to bring a Torah scroll in. They're never going to let us do it, so we got to think of new ways to do it. So you know what? We'll smuggle it through a bathroom. We'll do it through a bathroom. How can you bring a Torah scroll in the bathroom? Mitzvah baba ver. It's like you're trying to do a mitzvah, you transgress at the same time, but you're not even doing a mitzvah here. You're not even doing a mitzvah. You can't even make this stuff up. Yeah. Bad enough. Women would try and wrap themselves in the Sefer Torah. That's even worse. Right? I don't question if that's worse than bringing it through a bathroom. It's pretty bad. Yeah. You're gonna put this on, on your skin. Torah scroll's holy. It's supposed to be holy. Right? You're not supposed to touch it directly. How can you put it on your skin? You want to know why the Messiah hasn't come? Not just because of that. But this is how far it goes. This is how far it goes. Right? So we're not talking, people like that we're not talking about. Right? It's about us. It's about the fact we got to feel. Yeah, again, more of my Hasidic side here coming out. Right? And if a person doesn't feel it, and their soul is not moved, right? Their soul is not moved, there's pain. There's pain in the soul that the soul doesn't feel. How can the soul not feel? How can the soul not feel the pain? How can God not feel the pain here? God's gonna say, what can I do? I'll punish them, okay. Right? But it's more an awareness for us. Yeah. Because the claim is not going to be against them. They don't know anything. They haven't learned anything. However God's going to judge them, will judge them. Yeah. But what about Orthodox Jews? What about the infighting and all kinds of different things? Stop the Messiah from coming. There's a story of certain yeshivas have been fighting for 10 years. 10 years. Who inherited this yeshiva? It's one of the biggest yeshivas in Israel, in the world, actually. Finally, after 10 years, arbitration was done. One group had to leave, take things with them and whatever. Infighting. I mean, literally, they were like fights, but they, they kept separate, separate places, within the yeshiva and different things, and it's horrific. Shouldn't people know better? You would think so. You have stories in Hasidic sects where, the fight who's going to inherit, when the Rebbe dies. It's going to be son-in-law, this, that. It's not a clear-cut, what do you call it? Whatever it's called. That, whatever, if it's written out and it's clear who gets what, okay. Right? So no one's going to complain. It's clear. Right? You have a will, let's say. That's all I was thinking of. You have a will. The will says who gets what and whatever. Okay. So it's clear. Yeah, that's all the knows, or under duress. You're trying to convince them, and this, that. And you have all this infighting. And then, in a number of places. I get it. It's prestige, it's honor, it's money. There's, a lot of things involved. Okay. Far from little me to judge. Just you see on the outside, looks bad. Looks really bad. Yeah. People don't know anything. I'm not gonna have a claim against them. I'll make fun of them, but I won't have a claim against them. Yeah, because they don't know any better. Right? And let's say they could know better, they don't. Okay. But they don't know any better. Yeah, so you can't have such a claim against them. Right? The claim is going to be against us. And God can look down and say, wow, look at my people, they're sitting on the floor, fast the ninth of Av. Yeah, they're sitting and they're saying, all these keynotes, all these liturgical poems. Tremendous thing. They'll merit to see the temple rebuilt. Then God looks, he scrutinizes more. He's like, how come there are no tears? How come people are not so moved? Okay, I understand they're fasting, and it's hard, it's warm, it might be freezing in synagogue, whatever. Okay. I got them a certain amount of slack. And like, where's the emotion? Where in the world's the emotion over here? Well, isn't it good enough that they showed up? Okay. That's part of it. Right? As the Ramban here says, a person does something, right, through love, he's keeping the mitzvahs, and he does it properly, very good. Yeah, but what if you don't? What if you're just going through the motions? You get credit? You get credit. You get some credit. But if you did it right, forget about Kabbalistic intention. If you got it right, there's so much bracha. There's so much blessing. Right? What's the problem? What's the problem? The problem is, right, as we said before, something goes wrong over here. Right? What goes wrong? What goes wrong? Something offsets. Because you don't see this. You very rarely see this. Right? Someone, who's going to serve God not to, not to receive reward, right? And they're getting wealth and all kinds of things. We just said, the Gemara says nobody gets both worlds. You don't inherit both worlds. I remember, when I had all my money stolen. So my Rebbe told me this Gemara in Brachos. Gemara in Brachos says, not everyone inherits both worlds. Either you be, you have wealth in this world, right? And you be a big rabbinic scholar at the same time. So I asked him tongue in cheek, I said, you trying to console me? I said, are you making fun? Yeah. You don't get both. You don't normally get both. It's like water and oil. They don't mix. Yeah. These things don't mix. Either someone's a rabbinic scholar, they don't have so much money, right? Or they have so much money, not such a big rabbinic scholar. It's just the way it works. You don't normally get both. But he's telling you, if someone's on that level, what would happen? If they're on that level, they didn't get that. There's an eternal promise here that a person should get these things. If you do this, okay, so we said before, what happened? Something else offsetting that, right? There might be something else offsetting it. So even though this is normally true, right? It may be normally true, but if you did other things wrong, what's going to happen? Then you don't get the reward. You don't get this blessing, right? Doesn't mean you'll be destitute and other things. What it means is this exact thing you probably won't get. So then that leads to the question, why not? So we said before, saying a magic formula is not enough. It's not enough. As Yaakov Avinu said, maybe I'll do something to sin, maybe. So I don't deserve that divine protection, right? You can ask the same thing about what happened in the desert. That the Jewish people say, how can we overcome? The giants in the land? The sin of the spies, we're still paying back for that. Being paid back for that. Sin of the spies. Right? That's why we have all these catastrophes on the 9th of Av. Right? The Gemara says, oh, you're crying for nothing? You're crying for nothing? I'll give you something to cry about. All these catastrophes happen on the 9th of Av. What are they complaining about? What are they complaining about? God took them out of Egypt. God wiped out Egypt, wiped them off the face of the map. They come to Mount Sinai. God does all these miracles in the desert. Very good. But it's an old statement. Yeah. Oh, mother Hubbard, ain't nothing in the cupboard. We got no food. And they're going to the desert. But day in and day out, what does God do? He gives them the man. He gives them manna. Very good. Pretty miraculous. Double portion on Friday. Right? So every family got what they needed. Beautiful. God's taking care of all their needs, day in and day out. But God's working on their emunah. He's working on their emunah. Had they had proper emunah, they go straight into the land. Right? What happens? Sin of the spies. 40 years, they're walking around in circles. Right? No pun intended. It takes them 40 years. That generation has to die out. The greatest generation in the history of man that saw God face to face at Mount Sinai. We don't have any clue how great these people were. Very hard to understand what this sin is. What's the simple explanation? Simple explanation is, couldn't God have taken care of these giants? He could have taken care of the giants. Not a question. Right? Could have wiped them off the face of the map, just like we did Sancheir. An angel comes in the middle of the night, wipes out everybody. Couldn't he have done that? Of course he could have done it. So why didn't they believe it? Why didn't they believe that God's going to take care of them? Same thing Yaakov Avinu said. Maybe they're going to do something to sin. And if they do something to sin, they won't merit divine protection. And if they don't merit divine protection, they're in trouble. Not that God couldn't do it. Of course, for them to be a fool to say they didn't believe that. Because they saw, they came out of Egypt. They were the 20% that came out of Egypt. Yeah, they saw the miracles in the desert. How in the world are they not going to believe that? I mean, it's been brought down before by Korach, by Moshe Feinstein said, oh, blessed memory, when Torah giants the last generation. Yeah, what did he say in Drash Moshe's commentary on Chumash? He said Korach didn't get the message. He didn't internalize the message. Mind-boggling. What do you mean internalize the message? He saw all the miracles. He held the ark. He didn't die. Right? He saw it was going to come out of him. Through divine inspiration, prophecy. Wasn't a slouch by any stretch, but he wanted to be the high priest. He wanted to be the high priest. So jealousy killed him. Jealousy killed him. He didn't get the message. He didn't internalize the message. Well, we didn't show favoritism here. By the Bereshit of Moshe Lamor, God spoke to Moshe saying, he didn't show favoritism. He said, I'm just good as Aaron. Why can't I be the high priest? And then he started making fun. And then he took 250 great people with him. And that was the end. That was the end. Moshe Rabbeinu tries to get him to backtrack this, that, and what happened? Ego got in the way, or ego as we'd say here in Israel. Ego got in the way. What happened? Finished. But he didn't get the message, says Ramosha. Ramosha Feinstein says he didn't internalize the message. Mind-boggling, as great as he was. As great as he was, you see the power of jealousy. Right? Mentioned last night in Perkei Avos by Esav, same thing. He was as great as Yaakov, not even greater in learning. But what happened? He got destroyed. Right? He totally got destroyed. Why did he get destroyed? Why did he get destroyed? He got destroyed for one very simple reason. He got destroyed because desire killed him. Desire absolutely destroyed him. They say he grew up in the house of Isaac, Rivka. He saw his grandfather, saw angels. Okay, spoke about that last night. But desire killed him. Desire absolutely destroyed him. So you see, so a person going to say, you see, by the greatest of people, the greatest generation, right? The greatest parents, the greatest grandparents, yeah, let's say, in the history of man. And guess what? In a bad apple. Yeah, someone went off. I just saw by Biederman, and one of the things he says, the person should be miyayish. The person should not give up hope. It even happens to, to one of their kids. What do? We second guess. We second guess all the time. Person's going to say, I should have done this. I should have been, I should have been, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have done, I should have done, I should have done the other thing. And they blame themselves. So we are, to a certain extent to blame. But he says, if you give up hope in such a thing, right? If you give up hope in such a thing, then it just burns inside of you. He said sometimes, why do these things happen? The person has to make their own choice. The child has to make their own choice, which is true. Maybe it has more to do with that than what we did. Could be. But obviously the parents have major influence. Nonetheless, says Rabbi Biederman a very interesting thing. He says, maybe it's just all part of the test. It's just all, it's just part of the test. It's a hard, it was a hard thing for Abraham to throw out Yishmael. It's a very hard thing for him. Yeah, and the Medrash says he used to stop by, he didn't say who he was, whatever, just trying to, like check up on him, right? Ask his wife, how's he doing? This, that, but wouldn't say who he was. Yeah, very hard thing. But he listened to Sarah, and Sarah was right. Right? Sarah greater than him in prophecy. Okay. Nonetheless, to see a child do that is very hard. It's painful. You raise a child to go in a certain way. If they were never used to it, then now it's something new. Okay, can't have such a claim. It's a whole new way of life. Yeah, if they're brought up that way, they've gone to the best schools and this and that, and they end up going sour for any number of reasons. Not the topic here, right? But they can go sour for any number of reasons. It's painful. Painful to see how they dress. Painful to see how they act. But that's it. It's, but Rabbi Biederman says that, a person should not give up hope. Now, to realize that's also part of the test. Now, we're liable, at some level, but he says the problem is we second guess. We say, oh, if I only would have done that. If I only would have done this. And he says, who's putting those ideas into our heads? Moreno V'Rabbeinu, the Eitzar. That's what the Eitzar is doing. The Eitzar is going to break you. Going to say, see, you loser. You could have done this, you could have done that, and you didn't. And you didn't show enough love, and you didn't do this, and that's what happened. Maybe there are factors involved, okay. But at the end of the day, everyone's got free choice. Everyone's got free choice, but Moreno V'Rabbeinu, the Eitzar, is going to come and make you feel like a piece of dirt. Said, oh, you could have done this. Oh, you could have done that. Oh, you could have done the other thing. Yeah, and what does that do to a person? It destroys them, right? First of all, you don't want to see it. You don't want to hear about it. It's painful, right? It's painful the direction they choose. Okay. But they also make a choice, right? They also make a choice. Everybody makes a choice. But the evil inclination come and absolutely demolish you. And will tell you, see, it's all your fault. See, you could have done this. See, you could have done that. Yeah, but who says that's the reason? And let's say you would have done that. Would that have changed it? Right? One of the things we pray, for our kids, they go to yeshiva, whatever, is that, they work with someone that's, that's appropriate. All you need is one bad egg. You get one bad egg, it destroy, a child. Most of the education the child has, right, is in the house. True. Very much true in the house. Okay. But at the end of the day, bad influence could destroy them. It has nothing to do with the parents. Be the best of parents. Parents gave them everything. They have a great relationship, and they get caught up in certain things, and whatever. It's a hard thing. That's why my Rebbe, others say, you got to be careful. You can't hang out with, You always have to be on top of it. Now, again, it's not a guarantee either. Even if you are, it's very hard. It's very hard. I know somebody that, the child was given an ultimatum. School gave an ultimatum, and pretty much scared them. It did a good job. It did a very good job, but they're like, you can't have any, contact with this kid. This kid's absolute poison. Like, you want to come back? You tell us you don't have contact, right? And the school was right. The school was definitely right. It wasn't easy for the person to do, but school's 100% right, right? And therefore they did what they had to do, right? You know, they, and that turned out all right. That turned out fine. But it's a good scare tactic. But still, influences are bad, right? And the evil inclination will make you second guess everything, right? That's what Amalek brought to the world: doubts, right? Numerical value of Amalek, the gematria, every letter has a numerical value. Aleph is 1, base is 2, Gimel is 3. The numerical value of Amalek is suffix, is doubt, right? That was brought atheism to the world. They believe in supernatural, but doubt is the thing that can kill everybody, right? Nobody likes to be in doubt. Doubt is a bad thing, right? You want to have clarity. Sometimes not so easy to have clarity. Okay. Yeah. But in general, we could second guess all the time. We could say, oh, should have done this. Oh, should have done that. Oh, should have done the other thing. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. It should have an effect, right? And it does have an effect. The problem is that's what the evil inclination wants. Evil inclination wants the person to give up. The evil inclination wants that, oh, you could have done this. Oh, you could have done something else. Right? So in the back of your mind, you think, oh, if I would have given in, if I would have done this. Not a guarantee, though. Not a guarantee. That's what the evil inclination wants you to think. Yeah. But at the end of the day, let's say you could have done anything. There's nothing more you could have done. The damage was done. There was no turning back. Again, doesn't mean a person can't come back, but it's very hard because the evil inclination will say, see, look, you could have done this, you could have done that, you didn't. It makes you feel like a piece of dirt. It makes you feel like, a total failure, total loser, but you can't change it. Right? That's the pain. You can't change it. It's nothing you can say. You have no control. And sometimes, unfortunately, you just have to watch it. You have to watch it unfold. And, if they come back, very good. Yeah, if they don't come back, so okay. You still have to have, some level of open communication. Right. But, it's not a guarantee. But, if a person understands they did what they could have done, you can't take it back. Taking it back doesn't help anymore. It's too late. Right? After the fact or years later, it's too late. Nothing to do. Yeah, except to watch it. That's painful. That 100% is painful. That's what it is. And a lot of times, we look back, we second guess. Someone asks, does anyone actually choose the worst possible choice in the moment? There are a lot of factors involved, right? There are a lot of factors involved. It's not a, it's not a one stop shop answer here. Nobody wants to do the wrong thing, right? Everyone wants to do the right thing for sure. Sometimes doing the right thing is hard to do because it's too hard. We want to teach a lesson, right? We don't want to give in, right? And what do what do people say? What do people say? They'll say, you got to be the bigger person. If it's a child, you got to be the bigger person. Okay. What if you don't want to be the bigger person? What if you've been burnt? What if you've been, whatever? There's no regret. There's no remorse. Things have been said. Things have been done. So you say, well, it's a child. No matter how old they are. Does the person want the relationship? They should. But you get knocked over. You get knocked in the head enough times. I'm not going to say you're not going to take them back. It's going to be very hard to do that. Why? You got ego involved. And the person's hurt. So that doesn't mean it's going to, change overnight. But at the end of the day, we make decisions. We can have the best intentions. We go with the best, child psychologists, this and that, the big experts. What happens? Nothing. Nothing. Yeah. I'm not saying they're not, they don't have good ideas or whatever. In your case, it didn't work. In your case, I don't know, damage was done, and it didn't work. And there's no hope. That's painful, right? No, nobody ever wants to make the wrong decision, but let's say they did. Let's say they made the wrong decision. Maybe they weren't thinking it out straight. Maybe I don't know. Whatever it was. That eats a person alive. But okay, you made the decision. You did what you did. You can't take it back. The person won't let you take it back, probably either. No, it's too much hurt and too much pain. But let's say, let's say, okay, it won't be so depressing. Let's say you did everything you could. You did everything you could, and you still got a goose egg. You still have nothing to show for it. Yeah, it's painful, right? So Biederman says, I just saw this today. It's very interesting. He says that part of the test is what happened. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's your fault, right? So it's making you feel good in the sense where you did what you could do. The evil inclination wants to say, it's your fault. See, you could have done this. The evil inclination wants you to second guess. And when you second guess, it makes you feel like a piece of dirt because I could have done something. Maybe I still could do something. I don't know, maybe. But he said that a person gives up hope. When a person gives up hope, it makes them depressed. When it makes them depressed, they don't function. Right? So second guessing, he's saying, is bad. And that's what the evil inclination wants. The evil inclination wants you to feel like an absolute piece of dirt. Yeah? But there are times, okay, you made a decision. You had the right people around. You made the right decision. This is what happened. They give you bad advice? No. This is what was meant to be. Yeah? It's painful. Right? It can be very painful. It can be a lot more painful, if we let it get to us. We let it destroy us. Right? It can be a lot more painful. Right? And that's exactly what the evil inclination wants. So he said you gotta, we can always make the right decisions. And play Monday morning quarterback in hindsight. Hindsight is 2020. Great. If I had to do over again, I would do this, that, and the other thing. Right? We can all say that. Take this back, take that back, I do this differently. Maybe you would. Or maybe a person would do the exact same thing. Right? But you can't live thinking in the past what I would have done, what I could have done. That'll drive you absolutely up a wall. And that will make you, it won't just lead to depression. You'll agonize over it. You will totally agonize over it, day in and day out. If I only would have done this, woe to me, if I only would have done that. You'll never get out of that funk, right? It'd be very, very hard to get out of that funk. And that's exactly, as Rabbi was saying, that's exactly what the Yitzhar wants. Exactly what the evil inclination wants. To make you feel like an absolute piece of dirt, you know what you're doing, you cause it to yourself, and you got, as the famous statement is, you got no one to blame but yourself. Beautiful. Beautiful. Goes in the bathroom and cry. That's what it wants. That's what it wants, make you feel like nothing. Like nothing. Now, can we make mistakes? We can make mistakes. Yeah. They don't want to feel like they made the worst mistake in the world and it all hinges on you. Nobody wants to feel that. Nobody wants to feel that. Yeah. But again, I'm not gonna say, let's say, that relationship can't be helped. In theory, it could be. Right? You never say never. But I think about certain people that I think of being in touch with, but I think about it for about 3 seconds, and that's it because there's no point. And sometimes there's no point. I know that if you bang your head against the wall till it bleeds, is bad. Okay, so I don't need it. All it's going to do is bring other aggravation. So, like, if a person thinks it's really worth it to do, what the repercussions could be. Okay, when I tell people to do it, is it? The question is, are they going to get closure from it? Is something going to benefit over here? Nothing's going to be benefit. It's going to be a screaming fest and whatever. And you did this, and you did that, and people start saying these things to each other. It's never going to be good, right? Never going to be good. If a person can be at ease with having that discussion and seeing where it goes, it can also bring up a lot of bad memories, a lot of bad blood, and it can also be depressing. But sometimes there are things you can do. I'm not gonna be totally depressing it. Sometimes, there are ways to patch things up. Other times, it's gonna take it on the chin and say, okay, it's part of life. It's the way it goes. And let's say, for argument's sake, you did the right thing. You did the absolute right thing. According to Torah, you did the absolute right thing. And someone holds it against you. Yeah, so they say, because you didn't do that. Okay. And then they yell and they scream and this and that. They have nothing to do with you because of it. Okay. But you did the right thing. Right? In God's eyes, you did the right thing. So if you did the right thing, you don't have anything to worry about. Right? At the same time, it's still not an easy thing to do. Right? Definitely still not an easy thing to do. But if you did the right thing, you did the right thing. Right? Someone asked, restoring the relationship without seeking closure. Well, yeah. That would be seeking closure. But again, the closure could be not what you want either. Again, if it will be something positive potentially, or just final closure regardless of what happens, it's one thing. You have to see in your mind like where it would go, and what the effect, what the effect is going to be. Yeah, sometimes it may not be worth it. Just this might be too painful. Other things, too raw. Other things come out, and you feel worse than when you went in. That could be. But if someone says, Afal Pecan, even so, I'll do it anyway because it's important to me. Okay, but realize it may not go the way we think. That would give someone closure though. You did what you could do. They have today what we call parental alienation. Kids who won't speak to the parents. Yeah, parents disown kids also for both sides. Right? It's a painful thing. It's a painful thing. It's a painful thing either way. Yeah, but for whatever reason, people get poisoned. And because they get poisoned, or let's say something dramatic happened, and there's gonna be very little wiggle room for forgiveness. So what do you do? What do you do? It's a very hard thing. Right? Can there be reconciliation? Could be. I'm not saying there can't be. Right? I'm not saying it can't be. But it may not be what you want. Or at least, okay, a person will say, I feel good I did it. For other people, it may be. You don't touch it with a barge pole. That's part of life. Right? If a person, God forbid, had cancer. Yeah, you take chemo, you burn it out. If you have to take chemo, yeah, that's what you do. Yeah. If you have something like this, you get rid of it. I'm not saying it's the best solution, but sometimes that's what you have to do. Right? Because otherwise you drive yourself crazy. And in the end, there's nothing, sometimes there just is nothing to do. There's just nothing to do. And for parent to a child, it's a painful thing, or vice versa. It's a painful thing. No one ever wants to cut off, a parent or a child. Sometimes it has to be done. Sometimes for the sake of peace, it has to be done. But it's painful. And sometimes there's no way around it. If there's a way around it, good. Right? A person can make peace somehow, very good. If you can't, I got this question before. Someone asked, would you tell people to cut off, relationship with with a parent or a child or whatever? I say it depends. If it's toxic, then yeah, then you don't really have a choice. Yeah, but it depends on the situation. If it can't, if it can't be done, or let's say better, if the person feels, they'll do whatever they can, to salvage it, even if it's painful. Okay, they make a choice. They make a choice, but if it's toxic, I think the choice is relatively simple. You're not going to be part of that because you can't be part of it. Right? But not everything's black and white, right? Not everything's so simple. But I would say that sometimes that is a solution. That's the only solution. Doesn't have to be that way, but it happens. It can happen in the best of families also. You got, I don't know, there could be jealousy. There could be, you know, people you expected to help you and they didn't, and then you feel bad, and you can't rely on them, and they did something you don't trust them, and whatever, a lot of different things. Yeah, life is very complex. Life is not very simple. We have very complex relationships, and families is the worst because they know you the best. And they always remind you sometimes, oh, I remember you did this to that, like people live in the past. Okay. Yeah, but you have to see, you have to see how important it is, to try and salvage, and what do you gain? Is there something to be gained? Where does that go further? Is it going to help me in the bigger picture? I'm not saying you're doing it just for, let's say, financial gain or other things, right? But if it's something where, you see potential for the future, okay. But, if it's not going to solve anything or potentially make things worse, then, yeah, but how do you know that? Certain things you know. Certain things you know. That, no matter what you do, whatever, it's not going to change. As much as the person will change, maybe the other person won't. Or maybe the other person's not interested. Yeah. If they're not interested, what are you supposed to do? So some people would say, for the sake of peace, family peace, you have to be the bigger person. Right? And what's the answer? If you want to be the bigger person, be the bigger person. That mean you're obligated to? Our family peace is worth something. Not something to sneeze at. On the other hand, there's ego involved. You gotta say, I do all the work, I make all the effort, I get nothing in return. They'll never pick up the phone, they'll never do this, they'll never do that. So why bother? Yeah. There is what to be said for that. 100% there's what to be said for that. Does the person have to do it? Not obligated to do it. Would it be a good thing to do if they can do it? If they can't do it, you shouldn't feel guilty about it. Right? God is not expecting, us to be angels here. There are things that are not possible to do. And God's not gonna hold you responsible for such a thing. Yeah, because the Torah wasn't given to angels. Now, it could be if a person has greater potential, and this is the kicker. If a person has greater potential, God says, yeah, you could have overcome that. And you could have done this. God can play the second movie after you die and show you that. Right? And show you what you could have done and this and that. Very good. Okay. Yeah, you don't know that per se. But it's too painful for you to do. Right? So a person will say, well, maybe I'll get punished for not doing it. Maybe. But, if it's hard to do, I'm not going to say a person should do it. If a person's going to get broken in the process, there's no mitzvah to do it. There's absolutely zero mitzvah to do it. That's going to destroy you in the process. Some people that, have certain issues, or let's say multiple issues, for them to actually be able to fix them, really to be able to fix them and be in therapy for life. Because they're very deep rooted. So I mean, we also, many people have deep rooted things, okay. But to unravel all the deep rooted stuff is going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time. And at some point, the person may break from it because it's just too hard. They've been ingrained too long, been around too many sick people for so long. Yeah, so they got all these bad habits, let's say. What are they supposed to do? To unravel it would take monumental effort. If the person's not willing to do it, it's going to be hard. It's going to be extremely painful to do. Like you're going to have a hypodermic needle like stuck in you all the time. That's very hard to do. Very painful to do. Very raw motion, bringing things up over and over again. Try and get to the core what happened, and then unravel it and deal with it. Painful. Painful memories. You don't want to bring these memories back. Yeah, for some people, it would destroy them in the process. Now, in order to build someone, you might have to break them down. Okay. Right? So obviously a person would need, a proper therapist or a psychologist, whatever, to do it. Right? But it's the person's gonna be very, very hard to do. Very, very hard to do. Now, is it worth it? Depends on the person. Yeah. Yeah. But they know it's gonna be hard. Yeah. The easy way out is to say, I'm not gonna change and that's it. Okay. Yeah, because they know the change is gonna be hard. They know it's gonna be hard. So whatever, there's nothing easy here. As we always say, and there can be tremendous amount of pain. And sometimes you just gotta let it go. Sometimes you just, whatever it is, you gotta, you take the loss. It could be a painful loss, tremendously painful loss. Yeah, but sometimes there's absolutely zero you can do. Zero you can do. Right? The only question is how much you bang your head against the wall. That's the only question. Without I've had this thought a number of times. Yeah. But it never goes anywhere for exactly this reason. Right? Within 3 seconds, no. It's not gonna happen. Why not? There's no point. Nothing's gonna change. Not only nothing's gonna change, it's gonna be, essentially be a scream fest. You'll get screamed at, whatever, and that's it. Like nothing's gonna come out of it. Nothing's gonna change. Yeah. So you're saying so. There are hard things we have to live with. Everyone has hard things they have to live with. Make decisions. But make no mistake. The person made a decision, according to Torah, and there are negative repercussions. That doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. That for sure doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. Yeah. People are doing other things you can't change. This is what the Torah says. Okay, that's it. Nothing to do. Sibling, a Jewish person has a sibling marries an non-Jew. You can't go. It's going to be all kinds of pressure, from your brother, sister, parents, this, that, breaking up the family, doing this. Okay. But the Torah says you can't go. There's nothing to do. Yeah. The only question is how much you get screamed at. Okay. Now, they're going to have negative repercussions? Yes. They may never speak to you. Okay. Right? Let's say you had a very good relationship with them up until that point. Okay. There's no going around it. There's nothing to do over here. Right? The only question is how much you're going to get screamed at. So that's it. It's painful. I'm not saying it's not painful. They're saying it's nothing personal. They're going to take it as totally offensive. You don't recognize my spouse. You don't recognize my kids. That's it. You can't fix that. There's no way to fix it. The Torah says you can't do it. You're not supposed to bring up families. You're right. But the person with the marriage is breaking up the family, not you. You're keeping what the Torah said. When I listen to the Torah, it doesn't mean everything comes out, you come out smelling like a rose. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Right? That's tremendous self-sacrifice. The reward a person gets for that is immeasurable. We can't imagine. And the reason we can't imagine is because you're going through a lot of pain and a lot of hardship. And we say Lafitza Agra, right? Lafitza Agra means according to the amount, of pain, that's the amount of reward you get. Yeah. So the amount of pain a person's in, the greater the reward. Anyone want to go through the pain to get the greater reward? Nobody does. Nobody does. But when you go through hardship, the person perseveres. The reward is immense, especially if you're sticking up for Torah and you're doing what the Torah wants. So everyone else can go in kugel, as my Rebbe would say. So then go in kugel. So what? They don't like it. That's the way it is. I didn't change. You changed. You intermarried. What do you want from me? What do you want? Certain things I can't do. Okay. So then you pay the price. Did you do the right thing or you didn't do the right thing? You did the right thing. I never say you did the right thing. Right? Doesn't mean it comes out the way we want. All right, on that positive note, I'm gonna end here. We'll pick this up next week. I do this every Sunday, 9:00 Eastern time, 4:00 Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos and Q&As. Ethics of Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus. Want to send me an email? Rabbi Chaim Kaufman at gmail.com, RBBICH